If you are a doctor and you open your clinic, maybe for 7 years you make no money, or 8 years because you are a student. But tomorrow you will be rewarded by the efforts you have done. So a business, it is a mindset. It is how do you perceive life. And anybody which even at home is buying, selling or producing, for me is a business person. So some type of business doesn't make sense. A guy who is a drug dealer, he may make a lot of money in the 3 first years and he will finish his life in jail. So for me, that is a total nonsense business. You see, we completely failed in Addis. Completely. I mean, HelloCash is unknown in Addis. So where we were extremely successful, on the other hand, is the regions where there was no at all an infrastructure.
Thank you for joining us today. Before we dive into the details, could you introduce yourself in the way you might to someone you've just encountered?
That is a difficult question for somebody you have never encountered. So, if I had to introduce myself to somebody which will be from a generation, I basically would say that I was born in France from a Senegalese father and a Dutch mother, raised in Ethiopia as a child at the time of Mengistu, time was a Derg. Then I went to my father country, Senegal, and then I finalized my studies. And that was in, basically, I left Ethiopia in 1979. And then I went to Senegal, I finished my education. And then I went to university where I did Polytechnic. Polytechnic is a school which is in Senegal, an elite school for people who are good in mathematics. So my youth was really between Europe and Africa, but the first African country I have really been living was Ethiopia, which was for me an incredible experience. Then, after I finished my studies in Senegal, I went to Canada. I did 1 more year in terms of reinforcing my studying in the IT space. And then I was sent to Senegal to implement the the database of births and births and marriage and deaths of the city of Dakar, which was around 4 million data. So that was the first of its kind, first time in West Africa, French-speaking West Africa, that this happened. After 4 years, I was nominated as an advisor of the head of state of Senegal, which I was at that time the youngest advisor as a head of state. It was not, by the way, a full-time job. It was more like an advisor in the IT space. So at a young age, I had the chance to see how nations are planifying basically the development on the IT space and be part of it. A year later, I decided to open my first business venture in the name of NSA. So NSA was standing for Network System Area. Very ambitious. I thought it will be rocking after 6 months. Took way more than that before this company was break-even. But it was one of the first companies in Senegal where we had developers coding our own thing. And then I opened a second one, which was more in a space of digitalizing maps. So we were digitalizing, we were outsourcing maps for the French market, and we're digitalizing 5,000 maps a year, which was very successful, by the way, under the name of AlphaCAD. It's important to know that I was married at an early stage. Today I have 6 kids, and they all have, by the way, Ethiopian names, even if some of them are not Ethiopian rooted. So the interesting thing is when I left Ethiopia, there was no internet. But I was very much attached to the country. So each of my kids had a name from Ethiopia, but as you can imagine, the only names I could really remember were the names of the kings. So I called them Makonnen by mistake, because I didn't realize that Makonnen was a father name and not the name of the emperor himself, Menelik, Johannes, Theodoros. And I have 2 daughters also. My oldest is a daughter, Vilma, and the last one, Sechat. So I've been really delighted as a young person to travel between Europe and Africa, and also to be between East Africa and West Africa. And I think that has very strongly defined my character. From my father's side, I come from a family which is extremely Pan-Africanist. My grandfather, to be more precise, the brother of my grandfather is Mahmoud Diop. Mahmoud Diop created the African Party of Freedom. And that one was basically the party which was fighting for independence in the French West African countries. And my grand-uncle, Sheikh Anta Diop, that you may have heard about, was also the first one who could date carbon 14 and was been really fighting for the recognition that the Egyptians, the first Egyptians, were coming basically from this area and not, as today history make us believe that it comes from the Middle East. Let me put it like that. So that is something that has really been my use. This Pan-African approach. I'm also from a Christian mother and a Muslim father, so I also had a duality. It can be a richness, it can also be a conflictual situation. I decided that it should be a richness and not a conflictual situation. So that is what I would say about my youth. It's also important to know that in Senegal, the school I did, Polytechnique, is a military school. So I had also this military background that I really enjoyed, by the way, to be in that. And that school was 5 years. For 5 years, I was in the army. That was a little bit my youth. And then I had this thing that working for an administration. Working for an administration, I had a very special status because IT was new, so my department was new. So I was not really confronted to the basic difficulties that some people have when you start in an administration, because I had to create it. So I enjoyed the fact that I could see how difficult it is to make some changes in the country. And for sure, when you are dealing with databases, national databases, it's not easy, because there is a lot of interest in it. What I can say after that is then I made a big switch. I moved to Canada. I moved to Canada when I was 29, I think, if I don't make a mistake. And I decided that I wanted to enter in a space which was more in the distribution space. So when I entered in the distribution space, I opened a completely different type of company. I realized that I was probably a good software engineer, but I didn't have any skills in terms of selling. And I wanted to learn, how do you sell? How can you build a distribution network? And for 8 years, I've been successfully joining a group. The group is Sitcor. And we started to sell basically products who were in... first, it was very basic products. And then it was more and more advanced products, like we worked for MasterCard, we worked for telco companies, we worked for banks, and we were onboarding basically these people. The interesting thing about that is that at the moment I realized that I had two types of knowledge. One which was being able to operate systems, and one to distribute financial products. And then I acquired my first personal prepaid debit card. So I was in Quebec, not in Canada, but in Quebec. The first one who was selling prepaid debit cards through retailing shops. So that was an incredible venture. Unfortunately, for reasons that would be too long to discuss here, it didn't went through. It was very successful in the beginning, but there was a lot of complication on the regulatory frame. And finally, we had to stop that venture. But the very interesting thing about it is in fact, in Canada 25 years ago, we were already in the space of people who were unbanked, or underbanked, not unbanked, which were the migrants in Montreal. 50% of the population are migrants. So a lot of migrants didn't have an access to a bank account. So we came with solutions who were very innovative, where we were basically operating it, and we were not the ones who built the platform. But what I learned from that is when we had all these difficulties in terms of deployment, that owning the platform is something critical. And there are very few Africans who have built platforms in the space of banking. So I'm not talking about operating, I'm talking about really how do you call it, creating it and owning it. And then I went to the Netherlands. In fact, I went to the Netherlands for holiday. And then I met some fantastic developers, really people who are amazing. And Abraham Gulilat, which is Ethiopian also, and he's from Ethiopia, from Waliso, but he was raised a big part of his life in the Netherlands. And then we said, let's create a world-class platform, and that platform will have a banking side, a payment side, and that people can exchange services. We are not talking about goods, we were talking more about digital services, voice-based. And there came the name of World Open Services. It took us 4 or 5 years to get this platform right. Initially, we wanted to start it in the Netherlands, but our aim was to push it to the African countries. And what happened is we came for a holiday to Ethiopia. For me, it was already 35 years I haven't been to Addis. The exchange was incredible, as you can imagine. And then we realized that the banks here had a big need in terms of digital platforms. Now we are talking about 11 years ago, when there was no cyber source, there was no, so even at that time, there was no VAS license. So when we approached the administration, they told us, take a license, and then in 2-3 months, we will update that license. So in fact, the strange thing about Bel Cash, when it started, it had a garage license, because there was no other license. So they just told us, take a license, start preparing yourself the time that you get the license. And then came the VAS license. And then the amazing side was that we could at that moment really go to the banks and come with our platform. What was a little bit different for us is that our platform, we basically came with a brand. We say, why can't we build a Visa for Ethiopia or a MasterCard? There is no MasterCard, that doesn't exist. There is no Visa. So we said, why can't we start in Ethiopia a brand which will be a Pan-African brand? And that brand basically is linked to features who are in the mobile money space, which is very close to what the National Bank was looking for, what they call agency banking. Agency banking is that the pop and mom shops can be representing basically, the banks, and that we can go to the underbanked and unbanked population. So that has been, I would say, a little bit the path we have been following. What I can say about myself on another level is I like a lot sport. I like sports. I'm very much a person who enjoys diversity, especially when it comes to the continent. One of the things that I do believe is that Ethiopia is an incredible nation. I was shocked, surprised that when I came back to Ethiopia that there was ethnicity, because me personally, when I came, I didn't even know that there was I was maybe very naive, but I didn't know that. But I believe that Ethiopia is the soul of Africa, and that this nation has absolutely inspired the other African nations. In Senegal, our flag, by the way, reflects the colors of Ethiopia. And I'm very much fascinated by the Ethiopian history.
But you forgot to tell us your name.
Oh, sorry, my name is Vince Mountaga Diop. So Mountaga is Mountaga Diop is more proper than Vince.
So how would you say traveling has impacted you?
You see people who come from, who have my type of origins, which basically have a mother which is European and a father which is African. Even if you don't travel, you're already impacted at home, because it's you're basically between two civilizations, two ways of life, and that makes it also easier when you travel, because you have to be flexible. You have no option than to be flexible, because what's true here is not always true the other side. So when I traveled, let me say it was a very natural process. And I started traveling very young also. My parents, my father is a diplomat, or was a diplomat. I was working at the AU, at the United Nations, ECA. That's, by the way, how we came to Addis. So traveling, I started traveling very young. I have nearly no souvenir of not traveling. So it is in my DNA. But it's not true that I like traveling so much. I personally really enjoy when I can stay a full year in Addis without having to travel. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen so often. But it's not very complicated in terms of changing from environment. And now with internet, I mean, you basically can. I was at Dubai 3-4 years ago for a medical treatment, and I was supposed to go for 2 weeks. And then COVID came, and I had to stay 6 months because there was no more plane. Who was coming to Addis. And it was amazing to see that I could run basically the business from Dubai, just by having internet. And there you see that you travel, maybe physically you're traveling, but today doesn't mean that you're really traveling in terms of your work habits and so on.
How did you come to find your companies? I mean, did you have any entrepreneurial background before that?
No, and my two parents are, by the way, teachers. Father was teaching also at the university. He was heading after the UN, the University of Agronomy of Senegal. My mother teach young people, but my grandparents were traders, some of them. So I had traders, and also in the production side. So I cannot say it's a DNA thing, but what is sure, I always wanted to be my own boss. I personally highly recommend everybody that open something, try something, even if it is on the side business, because I think it's fascinating to build something for your own, and it doesn't really matter if it works, if it doesn't work, because it's all a learning curve at the end of the day. But I think everybody in life should at least experiment to have a business, even if it's a very little business. And the first business is yourself, in fact, because you are a business by yourself. You are running your own cash, you are running your own time, you are running. So if you look to your life and you say, okay, I will take care of my business, which means I'm going to take care of myself. And basically out of that, I will see how I can grow it. It doesn't always need to be formalized. I see a lot of gig workers now, people who just have a taxi or even rent a taxi to provide, like what we see with Ride, with Fares and so on, that are also business people. So it's not only you are a business person because you are running a big show, you are also a business person when you start to run yourself and have an activity which is out of the normal type of activity in terms of having a salary end of the month.
Can you tell us some of the challenges of being your own boss? What's that like?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge is basically it is that people are afraid of tomorrow, and they think that by not being their own boss, they secure themselves. So what helps a lot is if you have a religious background, if you are a believer. Me personally, it's written in the Bible that birds are way more than you, and I feed them, and I believe in that. So I don't believe that it's because I have a salary from somebody that I will survive. I believe that if I do my own business, I will also survive it. That I have bad days or good days, I will make it. So when you have that type of drive, you should not be afraid of tomorrow. You should be just put your best effort in it, and I'm convinced that tomorrow you will be successful. You will be challenged. You will be challenged. But you see, the thing about business is maybe the rewarding comes later. A lot of people are afraid to take a risk. So even in business, if you look in business, you will see that some type of business doesn't make sense. A guy who is a drug dealer, he may make a lot of money in the 3 first years, and he will finish his life in jail. So for me, that is a total nonsense business. And if you are a doctor and you open your clinic, maybe for 7 years you make no money, or 8 years because you are a student. But tomorrow you will be rewarded by the efforts you have done. And I consider that the moment you are starting to studying, to open that clinic, you are already in business, because you're taking that time to go in business. So a business, it is a mindset. It is how do you perceive life. And anybody which even at home is buying, selling, or producing, for me is a business person. So I like the principle that with the digital economy now, you can enter interlink all these little businesses and build platforms and help people to develop themselves.
Tell us the story behind finding Bel Cash.
Yeah, Bel Cash, it was really, as I mentioned to you after this debit card thing, I really decided I want to go and build my own platform. I know how to distribute, I know how to sell it. Now, when you enter in that sector, especially the sector of payment, it asks very, very specific skills, especially in security. You need very special skills. So I was very lucky to meet people, first who are sharing the vision, and secondly, what the skills to fulfill it. Because it's one thing to have a vision, and it's another thing to find the money to. But in that sector, you need people who can really build it and secure it. You see, in the sector of payments, there is no space for mistakes. You have two sectors where they cannot say, let's patch it. This is the medical sector. If you make a mistake, the guy may die. There is no way back. And it is a payment sector also. That if tomorrow effectively people can break your system or whatever, you're in trouble. So you need really to take it very serious, the security part of these digital platforms. You have to create the awareness, and so when we started, we came with a platform who had in fact 3 layers. It has a layer where people could communicate through voice, so it's like a telco part. In fact, we will be more specific if we say it's an MVNO approach, which is a virtual mini operator you could be. The second layer was a billing, and in the billing we had something very unique. We could bill as a telco, which is basically based on time, and we could bill traditionally, which is 1-0, like a credit 100 birr and a debit 100 birr. And under that we had a wallet and a full payment platform, and that made us having a very unique architecture. And that unique architecture is very useful today because it allows us in fact to create extremely advanced solutions, which are not only payment or banking, but we can also integrate other layers. And that layers basically allow, in fact, to integrate it with what I would call the real economy. When I say the real economy, it's e-commerce platforms, it's digital services. It can be based on I exchange with you, let's say, discussion, and you give me an advice and you want to be paid for that advice. So we are very proud of what we have been developed in the 11 last years. And we believe that we are one of the very, very few super platforms in the continent. I don't think there is more than 5. And definitively, the ones who have been built by a little team like ours, they are even very, very much restricted. And we will prove that in the next 2 years.
So I noticed most of the companies under Bel Cash have a name called Hello attached to them. Is there a reason for that?
No, that is not that's not true. No. Most of the brands have the Hello. But there is only one company that... No, you see, we made an investment initially in the fintech space. And then we made another investment in the solar space. So we are the first and the only one, if I don't make a mistake, who is in the pay-as-you-go space. So we have 15,000 farmers today who are... So we have a little assembly factory. We import the solar equipment and we provide it to the farmers. And they pay on installment based, and then they own the equipment. So it makes it affordable for them. So Hello Solar, one of the co-founders of Hello Solar, we have 15,000 units who have been deployed all over Ethiopia. And that's basically in the energy sector. And one of the reasons why we wanted to invest in that is we find out at that time that at least 40 to 50% of the people who have a phone only charge a phone during the weekends. So when you look to the Muslims, it's mostly Friday, the Christians is Sunday, and that's basically when they go to the market and they will go from their village to the waradas, and then they have access to electricity, and then they charge a phone. And then we see that these phones will remain 3 days active, and then the battery will probably been over, and then so we realized that having a kit, which was a very, very inexpensive kit in the solar home systems, would be a big change for them. Because you see, if you have a phone, you can access the market, you can communicate with people, you can transfer money, you can access loans, you can access grants. So the phone is no more a phone. The phone in the beginning was a voice. Today a phone is your bank, a phone is your health, a phone is your access to market, a phone is also access to logistic. So we find it relevant to make an investment. It was not a very big investment, less than $3 million. And most of the shareholders who have invested in Bel Cash have also invested in that venture. So that was our second venture. But we have also incubated 4 or 5 other companies. We don't have shares. Some of the reasons because we cannot have shares in it as a foreign entity. But we also incubated companies which are in how do you call it, in the onboarding space. We have incubated companies who are in the scoring space. We have incubated companies who are in how do you call it, in the medical space, like Hello Doctor. Or we have been part of it. So sometimes it is we just provide the platform. Sometimes we have helped them in terms of launching it. And if I take this whole Bel Cash and what I call sister companies, we have around 300 people. And I think we are pretty innovative. But what we are looking into is really, every time we have made an investment, it's because we had a problem. And we said we need to fix it. So we have been encouraging young entrepreneurs. And sometimes we have just make sure that they could have an environment where they could grow by having the first customers, by helping them to have a location. So it's not something I run myself. They all have their own management, their own board, their own financing mechanism, and their own business model.
Can you tell us the reason why you called the brand Hello?
Yeah, I mean, Hello is, I think everybody knows, it's 10 years ago. Huh? Now everybody's using Hello. But 10 years, 11 years ago, Hello was not used so much. That's why there was space for that name, by the way. So we started by Bel Cash, and then everybody in the country was, by the way, calling us Bel Cash. You see, Bel in Dutch means call. It comes from Graham Bell. So the verb bellen in Dutch is to call. So it was call cash, if you think about it. And NBE at the moment told us it's confusing if the name of the company is the same as the name of the brand. So we changed it to HelloCash. And from HelloCash came Hello Doctor. At the moment even we opened Hello Tebeka, which was a very, very interesting venture, but we closed it due to the political situation of the country in the last years. And then came Hello Solar, but after that, if you look today, we have also brands who are not Hello, like Mama Pays. We have a brand who's coming now, AfriPass. We have Africa QR. So in the beginning, it was very much Hello, and then we realized that we have to be careful because it's not even the same companies. So it could confuse people.
So you're one of the early companies in fintech when it comes to Ethiopia.
Yes, we are the oldest fintech alive.
So what made you interested in this sector?
Well, you see, the term fintech, you have to be careful. In reality, we are not a fintech. We are a tech fin. We're a technological company in the financial sector. So we provide platforms to the financial sector. But most of the time when people talk about fintech, they speak about people who are running financial services. And we do not operate. So we limit ourselves to provide the platforms to third parties. By the way, none of our platforms are operated by Bel Cash itself. That is the beauty of it. If you look to Hello Market, it's operated by a company called Amazis. If you look to Hello Doctor, it's operated by a company called Telemet. If you look to Hello Cash, it's operated by the banks. If you look to Mama Pays, it's also operated by the banks. So we are a platform. We design platforms. Most of the time we design them on the first principle of design. And then others operate it. So when you see that a platform like HelloCash last year moved $2.2 billion, which is also 125 billion birr, I think, if I don't make a mistake. It's not really us who have been, I wish it was Bel Cash, but it's not. We provide the platforms to 4 or 5 financial companies here in Ethiopia. We also have one which is out of Ethiopia. And then basically, it is them. So if you look to the number of tellers every morning who are opening the HelloCash service in the bank, we today have around 1,200 tellers. These are absolutely not people that we run. They are run by the banks. So the same way you will never see Visa. Visa is not run by Visa. Visa is run by the ones who operate Visa, which are the sponsor banks, which are basically. So we are in that space. So if you look today to, let me give some names like Kacha, they want to be in the fintech, classical fintech space, where they will have their own wallet and they run their own mobile money, just like Telebird does or like M-Pesa will do. And some are more in the processing space, like Chapa, Centipay, and some are more in the equipment space, like the point of sales, like SendPay, like ArifPay. So it's a very, very bright space where basically you can see that sometimes it's confusing because all that comes under the word fintech. But we are very clear. What we build is a smart part of the systems. It is what we have built actually, which is really incredible for us as an achievement, is we have created a platform called One Cash that is used by a microfinance here, One Microfinance, who basically can turn any bank in a neobank, and that's the first one in East Africa. So you can turn it in a neobank, you can use existing infrastructure, you can basically interconnect it. And this type of banks, some even call this open API banking. So the bank is completely virtual, it's completely linked to, you don't need to have branches, you can have one branch. And then you are more something like what is very popular now in Revolut, Monzo, and so on. So the way you design these banks is extremely advanced in terms of integration, securitization, but it's the power of it, it's use existing infrastructure. And that is something where HelloCash was really Hello Mobile Money. One Cash is another layer where we have a lot of demand now in Africa, not only in Ethiopia. There's at least 6-7 countries where people are asking us to provide this technology. And we are looking in our strategy. And that will be probably the first time that today 80% of our, of our tech is built in Ethiopia. And I think with the first banks who will be, between brackets, technologically made in Ethiopia and exported out of Ethiopia, probably will come from that.
Let me go back to some of the questions and maybe ask you, what made you decide to come here and start a company, or what was your reason to start Bel Cash here?
Yeah, so it's a combination of 2 factors, 3 factors. First, as I told you, I was rooted here as a child. And then when I came back with Abraham Gulilat is my partner, which is Ethiopian, which is 100% Ethiopian, we came for holiday. And at that time we were more thinking about pushing it out in Europe and then coming to the continent. And what we find was that there was a big lack of infrastructure in terms of tech providers in the country. So what we decided is why don't we start with Ethiopia? Why are we busy with pushing this in other countries? Why doesn't we start where we are rooted from? And Abraham, which is very nationalistic, by the way, when he invested, he had also a condition. He said that he want absolutely that his investment would be also deployed in Ethiopia. So then we decided that let's make Ethiopia our first African country. At that time, we were using it in Europe, but for only limited purpose. And when we came here, he was supposed to stay here, and I was supposed to be in the Netherlands. And then I met a lady, which later on I married, and I find it very interesting to be in Ethiopia. And his wife was not so much and he had young kids, so it was difficult for him to come here. And so we switched. So finally, God has made it like that. And that is how I finally was start operating here, and he was operating the business there. And he was coming, by the way, every 45 days. He's staying 2-3 weeks with us here in Addis. So Xavier wanted it like this, and so this is how it happened.
Let's talk about HelloCash. Can you tell us how you started it, what it does, and how it could be so popular right now?
You see, HelloCash, when we started, we basically, HelloCash is mobile money. It's exactly what Telebirr is doing. It's exactly what M-Pesa is doing today. And we started that like 9 years ago. And in fact, the banks received the authorization 6 years ago. So our first platform will roll out this type of things. And that's what people call also mobile money. But in the banking sector, you don't call that mobile money. It's more a mobile wallet. So it is exactly the same, except that if it is mobile money, that means that the money will be basically a mirror in a bank. So the cash of Telebirr or M-Pesa will be somewhere in a bank in Ethiopia. And when it is the bank doing it itself, there is nothing to mirror because the bank already has the money with it. So now you have 3 different type of entities who can do that. You have basically the fintechs. You have the telcos who have a license for it. You have the banks and the microfinances. And also you have the post, in fact, which you haven't started it yet. So we started by something very much, very, very straightforward in terms of, there was also not a lot of space for innovation, I must say. The previous administration was very, very precise in what you could do and not do. So I think that what was not allowed, basically, what was not, how can I say, that was not prescripted, was by nature not allowed. You see the difference now is what is not forbidden is allowed. At that time it was more like what is not allowed is forbidden. So in that you don't have a lot of space for innovation. So now we are way more innovative because we get support from the authorities to be innovative. So in the beginning it was like really, so these platforms we have designed them, they are basically all, that's also why all of us had very similar platforms in terms of features, because this is the features on your platform and this is it. So that was mobile money, which is an instrument to move money, to do payments and money, deposit mobilization, and that you can withdraw through pop-up shops. It's not a core banking system. There is no loans in it. You see? And then the core banking was basically the loan part. So we started with that, and then we made a way more advanced platform where you can have microloans, mesoloans, what you see today with Telebirr, that they do with local banks. And we built our own switch in the integration capacity with international switches, with core banking systems, which asks some skills.
So how is the impact on the economy? What kinds of impacts did you make?
You see, we completely failed in Addis. Completely. I mean, HelloCash is unknown in Addis. And we failed in Addis because there was no interoperability. There are a lot of banks in Addis. Every corner of every street are branches. So basically what the banks do every time that you go to a bank to lend money, they lend you money, but they say the first floor is going to be ours. So I have never seen a city with so many bank branches. This is 40 to 50% of the economy of the country. So the banks were very much focusing on that. And then what you see is if there is no interoperability, the deposit mobilization, the people send money to each other by depositing in your account. But second element, the telco was not working. It was very, very, very bad. And so because the telco was also not very functional, I speak about 6-7 years ago, no internet and so on. So that blocked the development of this. And the regulatory frame was not really in place. There was no cyber law, there was a lot of things were not in place. So the National Bank had to prioritize first to implement core banking in the banks. So where we were extremely successful, on the other hand, is the regions where there was no at all an infrastructure. And that's why also we were very much successful. Our platforms were very successful in Somali region. So Somali is big, it's half of France. Now when we came there, the number of branches were extremely low. And we started with a very little microfinance, who had at that time 8,000 people and 8 branches and probably around 100 people and stuff. Very, very little. And when we came, these people have been incredible, the people of the microfinance. They really, really brought it in each village where you had no ATMs, nothing. So you can even tell you stories who are unthinkable. That in some areas we had to walk behind donkeys because they were mines. So we were usually doing that, we're avoiding that a human being would just be blown by. So they really did the effort to go in every village and open a little shop, and not open a shop, make sure that a shop will be a representative. And as Somalis are traders, and also they are, how do you call it? They are traders, and they are basically, a lot of them have been traveling around in Hargeisa and in Kenya. We really saw it picking up very fast. So today they are moving 300-400 million per day, which is insane if you think about it, because we talk about a population between 6 and 8 million people. So there it immediately took very fast. People started to use it, and that replaced the inexistence of that region. Went from underbanked to banked, because today you have each family has basically a HelloCash account in Somali region, and other players came in also, like Iber and some others. But it remains that HelloCash is a very dominant player there. So that microfinance today is, by the way, Shebele Bank, which has grown up to be a bank. It was a regional microfinance. So there it went very easily. But in some areas we failed, like without giving any names, like in the coffee areas we failed, because the coffee areas, the needs are not the same. You see, the coffee areas, people have money at the moment that the coffee is ready, and they have no money 3-4 months later, but we are not lending. So what they really need is a bridge loan during the time that to wait that the crops are for the crops that the coffee is ready. So you see that in areas where it was basically about moving money, where there were trading areas, we were immediately successful, but we didn't really have a value proposition on HelloCash on the areas where more farming areas. So some areas are both. So we were successful in Somali, we were successful in Tigray, we were not too bad in Gambela. Gambela, we have made some interesting improvement. So in some areas, in Addis were not at all. In some part of the Amara region, HelloCash was okay, but nothing special. But in some areas, we have really seen HelloCash making a life change. And where it is very in evidence, it is in the Somali region.
As you've mentioned, HelloCash has been successful in the regional areas. But how is the impact of internet penetration? I know you use USSDs, but there's also digital literacy that comes with it.
Yeah, you see, personally, that story about digital literacy, I don't believe in it. I think that is a big NGO thing. So, and the reason why I don't believe is if you send money through Western Union to somebody, he will find a way to get his money. So I have never seen, if people can make a number to call, they can't make a number to send money. And especially if you are the beneficiary, I've never experimented in my life, somebody we have sent money to and was not cashed out. So I think that if we send money to everybody, the digital literacy will be fixed the same day. So personally, I think people are talking about something different. When they speak about digital literacy, basically what they're talking about is savings. They're talking about people putting money on the side, interest, savings, how to optimize their money. That part, I agree. But you see also when people have very little money, they're really going to make savings. No, I think we take the problem on the wrong aspect. It should not be about asking people to make savings. It should be about how can we make people make more money? How can we help them to, you see, one of the big problems that you see is all the dalala system. If I look to Gambela or even to Somali, what shocks me is that I can see that a buck can be, a sheep can be 1/3 of the price of what we sell in Addis. And I cannot explain that. But I believe that with the digital revolution, people will get a better price, the middleman will get a lower price, and it will be a more fair price. Because at the end of the day, the ones who produce should be rewarded for that. And here we have seen cases where, at that time, I'm talking about 2-3 years ago, a bug was 3,000 birr. The farmer, the livestock guy, a person receives 1,000 birr. He get 500 birr first, then they sell, then he get another 500 birr. But that is not fair. That are the type of things that the digital revolution, what the country is implementing, will change. Because people will have access to the market, people will have access to the information. There will not be only one guy in the neighborhood who can lend them money. The banks will go deeper. You have seen that it is unbelievable that Ethiopia is such a nation, an incredible nation, has only given 300 or 400,000 loans. That means there is a problem with the system. We need to go down. We need to lend to the ones who are not collateralized. We need to find mechanisms to give little loans. By the way, these little loans have even a better return for the banking industry to the people who really need it, so that they can bring to the market their animals, they can bring their crops, and that basically they can grow with it.
Tell me about the role you play in the market when it comes to transacting money, and how much money have you transacted to this day?
Yeah, we have transacted, our platforms, let's be clear one more time, our platforms have transacted around $4 billion. The role, I think we have a role of leaders in the innovation space. A lot of regulatory, a lot of times there have been a discussion about the regulation in the e-commerce space, as well as in the space of, how do you call it? Now we are looking also in the data space in terms of how do you score, because at the moment you lend, you need to score. So my feeling today is that we have really been a pioneer in Ethiopia. The companies who started with this, unfortunately, I don't think there is anyone remaining in the picture. So we, at that time, one of our big competitor was Ember, which is no more active. Some came 2-3 years later, and I think some are doing well, like Amole. And then you have the newcomers today, where we see very talented young people coming on the market. But we have proven that it is possible. Where everybody told us it's impossible, we have proven, yes, it's possible. And it's possible not only to do it, but also to remain alive. Because we have been through 3 different administrations, which is not easy in terms of, how do you call it, changes of regulation and so on. And we have been also confronted to the problem of Forex, which is a real issue. But our biggest proudness, without any doubt, is the number of young people we have been training in Bel Cash. And that we consider today that they are highly professional. To give you an idea, when I started, I was only 20% of the technology was made in Ethiopia and 80% in the Netherlands. Now this is reversed. 80% is made in Ethiopia and 20%. And my intention is now to go out of Ethiopia and turn Bel Cash in a Pan-African venture. And I'm sure that will be with the head office here in Addis. So that is something that that is our biggest pride, and the capacity that we had to really, as a company, see the value of our people growing.
Okay, so do you think market competition plays a role in stimulating innovation?
Oh no, you need a market. There is no innovation without, I mean, if you look to what happened in the past, like if I take the story about what was the name of that, the public bills. The public bills, Laulu. it didn't make sense that we have given that to one company, and at the end of the day, 3-4 years later, it didn't fix major problems. And no, we should have let the competition do it. Because if we, at that time, it was an open platform, everybody could pay, I'm sure we will have improved a lot. So I believe in competition. I 100% believe that the best thing ever that can happen to Ethiopia is to allow competition. Now, let's be clear. I also believe that an economy needs to be planified. I'm not saying that it should be fully liberalized. That's not my point here. But at least competition creates innovation, better pricing. And competition is always concentrated on the end user because you have to sell something. So if you don't allow competition, you will create frustrations at different levels because you know it can be done better. So even if I was probably now the oldest fintech in the country, the last thing we want is to say that our position should give us special benefits. And then you kill the competition. And then at the end, we will be killed ourselves by lack of competition because we will be lazy.
Can we talk about one of the other brands you have, Hello Solar?
Yeah, Hello Solar, it's an incredible venture. So when I initiated Hello Solar, and then I brought a team together. Team where some of the people were close to Bel Cash. And I also brought my daughter, which has a PhD in how do you call it, in solar energy. So basically what we see is it all starts by energy. See, you can speak about connectivity, but if the phone has no battery, no energy, there is no connectivity. You cannot connect. And Africa should really, and Ethiopia is one of, by the way, Ethiopia has an extremely high level of UV because we are so high and the sun is, we are close to the equator. So that means that we can really surf on that. So for me, that has been an incredible journey in terms of seeing people who are living in areas where there is absolutely no light. And then you start to see these houses getting light in the evening. And then people are basically charging their phones. We have 3 sets. One, it's a very inexpensive set, which is just 3 lamps. And the biggest set includes a television. So that is around $1,000. Now, if you think about it, it is about a smartphone, the high end of a smartphone. So when you go to a house where there was, well, at 7, 8 o'clock, there is no more activity, basically no more activity. But you have other issues. You see, when the kids are near of petroleum lamps, it burns their lungs, it affects their capacity to grow, even at the level of their education. It has incidences on their health. So we don't realize that because we are living in the city, we have no really experimented that. But when you see that in a house now the kids are studying longer, the kids of the neighbors are also coming, the information arrives straight, they can now send money and receive money from their phone. It's a game changer. It's really a game changer. And I hope that there will be more companies like Hello Solar. The biggest thing we face is the Forex issue. Otherwise, we would have implemented already 200,000, 300,000 units. People are very receptive to that. It's very amazing how, and sometimes you see things you are shocked. So we were recently in one of the areas, and the farmers received us, and they killed a cow. But the equipment is not even the price of the cow. So they were so happy that there was a television there, but behind that. So we have developed a concept we call the Green Connectivity Network, which is an initiative taken by Bel Cash with his sister companies and other companies, where we intend really to have 15,000 smart kiosks in the country. We should create around 100,000 to 200,000 jobs and provide services, digital services, financial services, entertainment, health, education to 45 million farmers. It's not something we will do alone. It has been validated, by the way, by the Job Commission creation. And we are testing each piece and what we want to do, but it's pretty expensive. Right? It's a project of $40 million. And we intend to bring that to the market.
How many people have you impacted through Halo Solar?
60,000 to 80,000. You see, we have 15,000, 15,000 solar kits on the ground. In average, an Ethiopian family is 5 to 6 people. So you can do the maths. We are still not where we want. We wanted at least to impact 1 million people. But at least we try to do our part.
So what are the upsides and downsides of being in the market in Ethiopia?
There is a big upside, is for sure the market and everything which has to do. Ethiopia is a unique country. Yeah? I mean, Ethiopia, if you look to the history of Ethiopia, Ethiopia is not a kingdom, it was an empire. So when you see what Ethiopia has provided in terms of advancement to the continent in the 60s, I mean, Ethiopian Airlines, the first company in terms of the first post office, the first banks, and so on. So we have seen in the history Ethiopia being a powerhouse, or even the powerhouse of the continent. And then we have seen Ethiopia going through its different revolutions. And we believe that Ethiopia will come back as a super powerhouse, at least the powerhouse of East Africa, at the same level as probably even better than South Africa or Nigeria, competing with Nigeria. So being part of that is very interesting, but it's also very challenging. So, and if you look to the World Bank, Ethiopia will have a population of 250 million people in 2050. I mean that Ethiopia will have a bigger population than Europe. So you can imagine that it doesn't please everybody that you have a lot of, it's going to be a huge population with an incredible diaspora, by the way. The only country in Africa who have a language which is official in a Western country is Ethiopia. Amharic is an official language in Washington. And I'm not talking about a secondary city, I'm talking about probably the most powerful city on earth. So Ethiopia has a lot in terms of potential. Now, the challenging part of it, every time that you make a change, there will be frustrations, there will be tensions, and how bigger is the population, how more complicated it is. The country has an history which is not simple. So that is really the biggest challenge I see. It's not even the birr issue or the forex issue. It is, these changes are going now very fast. Are people able to absorb them in a very short term? How much are we going to have tensions between communities or between systems? The administration, will they be able easily to adopt? Because sometimes the head says something, but if you go on the ground, it's a very different interpretation. So that are the things that we see as big challenges for the next 4 or 5 years to come. But we are here since 10, 11 years, and we take the challenge. And I hope that things will go for the best.
Speaking of challenges, let's talk about the challenges you faced back then when it comes to regulations, policies, and so on. What kind of changes would you expect in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge we had 10, 15, 11 years ago have nothing to make with today. Yeah? Today it's very easy.
Okay.
So if I give you some challenges, I started to say the license, we started with a garage license. And then there was no law for cybersecurity, there was no interoperability, there was no internet. And the first agent that Somali Microfinance signed, the day they started, they were jailed for a night because the police didn't know, and the Ministry of Finance had not informed at that time the region. So they thought that these people were thieves. So I mean, today, everybody is talking about digitalization, about mobile money. So the challenges have changed. Competition will come in more. But at that time, the challenges was people didn't know it's possible. How can a merchant be representing a bank? There is no interoperability. We have been through a very difficult time. At the moment when Abdillah was taken out of power, the people thought the bank was belonging to Abdillah. So everybody took his money away from the bank. And then there was a lot of tension. And then our transaction went from 100,000 transactions a day to 500 transactions a day after 3 months. And then the people wanted the money out of the banks because the whole region, the banking sector was not working. The only thing who was still working at that time was HelloCash. And then the National Bank had to help, the Ministry of Finance had to help. So we have seen as Bel Cash, our revenues going from, went down to 10% of what we did the year before. So we have been through a lot of challenges.
What's your source of optimism when it comes to Ethiopian markets?
So for me, first, I don't differentiate Ethiopia from the rest of the continent. And so my source of optimism has a name, Africa. And as I mentioned to you, the soul of that continent for me is Ethiopia. So that has to be very clear. So my perception about Ethiopia, what Ethiopia is testing is very, very unique. Because it's a federal nation with a different, where ethnicity and land is combined. So that's also something that, if it works, probably it's a model for the rest of the continent. Because that is also something that never have been experimented in reality. So I want to be part of that. I want to see that, I want to be part of how can technology support that. I'm very much impressed by the Ethiopian youth. I see them really, a lot of people are trying things, and I like the fact that they try. I love also the fact that Ethiopia is one of the most religious country on earth. Where it has a bad side in terms of innovation. Sometimes it can be a blocker, but the good side of it is people have values, and I like the fact that people have values, because on values you can build. It's very difficult if the only value of a person is money. So that is something that that makes me very optimistic about the country. And to end, I think that everybody realizes that we can do better. And people are not lazy. So that's important. It's very discouraging to work with lazy people. So that are my source of optimism. Technology, it's only growing. It's going to be more and more easy to access. If I don't make a mistake, it took 100 years for the train to arrive from Europe to Africa or something like that. It takes today 48 hours, 72 hours for a new smartphone to be in Addis Ababa, max. So we are playing more and more with the same tools, the same protocols. We can access this. The digital space is a blue ocean. That is no discussion. It can go as far as your intellect can integrate it. Maybe one of the difficulties for the Ethiopian young people is that they cannot buy stuff. I'm talking now about buying protocols, buying software online because of this Forex thing that I'm sure will be fixed sooner or later, at least partially. So that new generation also that we have seen of students coming out. The people who were coming out of the university 7-8 years ago were not operational. They were not, I mean, I can tell you. And they were not operational because in the university they didn't have an access full-time to internet. So they probably you need to have them in your office for 1, 2, 3 years before they will be at standard. When I look to the ones who are coming out now, it's completely different. They, after 6 months, they are absolutely operational. And that is because they had an access during their whole period to the net, and the other ones did not. And then they had only access to the books, who are basically the library that is in the university. So yeah, so I'm very, very optimistic.
So you mentioned young innovators as one of your sources of optimism in Ethiopia.
Hard-working people, strong history, cultural values. I said that before even I talk about innovation. Because if you don't have that, you as a nation, I think you will not develop yourself. We can say what we want about America, but it's hard-working people. The Americans, at least the founders were hard-working people. And the innovation side, it's a regulatory frame who makes it innovative, who allows you to do things. And when it comes to the population, a population, whatever you will bring them, who fix the issue, they will take. So the populations have never been an issue worldwide. If you bring them something that is going in their direction and they like it, they will go. And sometimes you can see it can be difficult. I mean, the first movie theater in Ethiopia was called Bet Shaitan, if I don't make a mistake. But the population liked the movies and they went to see the movies. And after that, you regulate the type of movies you put in the movie theater. So for sure, you will regulate also what you want to see. A nation has to take his own values and build it on that. But it's a young population. People are smart, hardworking people. I think people are confused now with some external factors where people basically were expecting maybe more and that it go faster. But that confusion, I'm convinced, will disappear and the future will be bright.
What should we expect from your company in the coming few years?
We were the number one, and we expect to remain the number one.
Any new products you're planning to launch?
Yeah, we were the number one in platform providers. We know that's clear. And yeah, for sure. We're going now to go to a Pan-African approach. We will raise more capital. And what we really work now on is a Pan-African seamless currency and building a platform which will help countries to trade cross boundaries at SME level. And we are very much also focused on the neo-banking space in micro and meso loans. So our focus is very much now, how can you help SMEs, MEs, farms to grow through the digitalization. So that's our main thing.
I really want to thank you for your time. Before we go, we usually like to close with book recommendations for our audience. So if you could recommend 3 books that you enjoyed.
One has been written by one of my uncles, which is African Nations and Culture. And I will especially recommend that to the Ethiopians, which is a history of this whole Africa, but starting by Egypt, and who were the original founders of Egypt. I think Ethiopians can learn a lot from that because their history is very much linked to that. So we are not talking about the modern Egypt. That is Sheikh Anta Diop. I will recommend also the book Sapiens from Harari. I think that it's interesting to see how the human species has evolved. And I also recommend to everybody who has a religious background to take the time to read the holy books. But read it to try to understand what is in it, the philosophy which is behind it. So very often people are in a religion, but they don't take the time to really read and try to interpret it themselves. So that is something that's maybe also a question of age. So I'm not recommending that to if you are 20 years, but more if you come to my age, which is more. And the last one, maybe if I can give another one that I really loved a lot, and I learned a lot from it, was Shogun. Shogun. Yeah, Shogun, it is the history of the Empire of Japan. In Shogun, you see the influence of the Westerners when they came, how it divided Japan and how Japan came back together. I think that book has a very interesting... there is a movie also, by the way, if you don't have the time for a book.
Thank you for your time.
It's my pleasure.